Hi everyone and Happy New Year. I'm Alice and in the next 8 minutes I'm going to take you on a journey, one that explores a new and unified perspective on the link between volcanic eruptions and abrupt shifts in the Earth's climate over the past 100,000 years. The Earth's climate is dynamic. Deep ocean sediment record shows that over the past 2 million years, the climate system has frequently cycled between glacial and interglacial states due to variations in the shape of the Earth's orbit. When orbital eccentricity is greater, the Earth moves further from the Sun and the climate cools, and vice versa when the eccentricity is lower. If we zoom into the most recent glacial period, ice core records indicate a complex, dynamic climate characterized by rapid fluctuations between warm and cold. These are referred to as Dansgaard-Oeschger or DO cycles. One complete DO cycle is comprised of two distinct phases. The first is a fast onset warming event, also known as an interstadial, which I've highlighted here in darker grey. And second, a cold event known as a stadial, during which temperatures dropped, the climate became drier and wind strengthened, which I've represented here by white panels. The question of what caused these events is one of the most enigmatic questions in paleoclimate science, but is one that to this day remains to be answered. So what do we know about them? Well, first things first, they don't exhibit the same cyclicity as the glacial and interglacial cycles, and so can't be attributed to orbital forcing, nor are they consistent with timescales of paleogeographic processes, which leaves the cryosphere, ocean, or the atmosphere. Since the 1980s, a multitude of hypotheses have been developed to test the relative influence of each of these components in the onset and expression of DO cycles. From the event sequences proposed, three key drivers have emerged: an increase in the amount of fresh water being deposited into the North Atlantic, large-scale changes in ocean circulation, and reorganization of atmospheric circulation, such as displacement of the intertropical convergence zone and polar fronts. All are linked to the end result of abrupt climate change sustained by strong, self-amplifying or positive feedbacks in the system. However, all do still require an initial and currently unknown trigger. So by evaluating new and existing literature, here we define three key features that any candidate trigger mechanism should have. And from this, we can then ask, do volcanic eruptions adhere to one or more of these three? Well, to start, volcanic eruptions are a frequent feature of the Earth system. The ongoing development of high-resolution ice core sulfate records and the use of increasingly sophisticated statistical techniques have provided crucial information regarding the frequency of the largest eruption events of the last glacial period. New evidence suggests that a far greater number of large magnitude eruptions occurred than existing databases actually would suggest, and that these did not occur with any clear regularity when compared to the orbital cycles I mentioned earlier, which means that they are seemingly aperiodic. But then some of you may think, well, surely this means there were more eruptions than DO events. Well, this links to the second point. So we know that not all eruptions are created equal, and that factors such as the rate and quantity of sulfur dioxide emission, eruption magnitude, duration, latitude, and source magma composition all determine the climatic significance of a given eruption. Coupled with a dynamic and evolving climate system, volcanic eruptions could therefore force the climate system with varying levels of severity and persistence, which is consistent with the variable nature of the known DO events. So finally, we need to ask whether volcanic eruptions can indeed be unified with existing DO event sequences, for which proxy and model-based evidence currently exists. So here we're going to look at this in the context of a interstadial to stadial transition. The most widely accepted sequence was proposed by Wallace Brooker back in 1985, in which he suggested that changes in the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation caused by increased freshwater flux played a key role in driving the Northern Hemisphere climate into stadial conditions. This sequence is still widely accepted today and is backed by a large number of proxy and model-based studies. But the question remains, why would more freshwater suddenly be deposited into the ocean? But also, how could this link to volcanoes? Well, we know that volcanoes can alter the composition and structure of the atmosphere and in turn cause short-lived cooling. The positioning of major circulation systems, such as the intertropical convergence zone, is strongly influenced by hemispheric temperature contrast, such that it's drawn towards the warmer hemisphere. So in the case of a northern hemisphere eruption, eruption-induced radiative cooling could displace the ITCZ and drive the polar front southward, causing cooling and ice sheet advance in this hemisphere. As ice sheets advance, more fresh water is deposited into the Atlantic by carving, rafting, and melting of icebergs, subsequently weakening the meridional transport of heat by the ocean and causing sustained reductions in surface temperature. This framework is consistent with existing model and proxy-based evidence showing strong feedbacks between the atmosphere, ocean, and cryosphere, and is thus consistent with existing event sequences. So now we ask, if a northern hemisphere eruption could cause stadial conditions in that hemisphere, what would cause a shift back to warming? Well, one explanation could be that the switch back can be explained by the absence of a northern hemisphere eruption. So in this scenario, and in the absence of volcanic induced forcing, surface temperatures would rise and freshwater fluxes would drop. Coupled with the northward migration of the intertropical convergence zone and a transition to warmer surface temperatures, this would give rise to interstadial conditions in the north. Or perhaps stadial to interstadial and interstadial to stadial transitions could both be caused by volcanism. So a similarly large magnitude southern hemisphere eruption may have the antipodal effect compared to a northern hemisphere eruption by preferentially cooling the southern hemisphere, displacing the ITCZ and northern hemisphere polar front, causing dramatic warming across the North Atlantic and subsequently giving rise to interstadial conditions. But unfortunately, the low number of well-documented large southern hemisphere eruptions currently precludes our ability to test this idea, meaning for now it's purely speculative. However, I do think that both hypotheses do undoubtedly deserve further exploration. So the aim of this perspective is ultimately to unify what we do know about the drivers of DO events from over 50 years of paleoclimate research, and this spans a huge range of disciplines, including paleoceanography, geomorphology, sedimentology, and climate modelling. Also, production of the large magnitude explosive eruption database, among others, allows us to start quantitatively considering links between climate change and volcanism in the past and testing hypotheses associated with this relationship. Efforts to refine the existing paleoclimate record are also ongoing, with increasingly sophisticated analytical techniques being used to date both stalagmite and icicle records alike, and with a higher precision than ever before. So ultimately, our hope is that this work will highlight the need for a more holistic view of climate change on Earth, one in which volcanism is considered a key component, if not the trigger, of diverse and systemic feedback loops that drive abrupt shifts in the Earth's climate over hundreds, even thousands of years. Thank you so much, everybody. I am so deeply grateful to each and every one of you for taking the time to listen to my talk today. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas on anything that I've presented today, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me via email. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference.